Welcome to Amiga Ireland. I'm Irla.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Luke. In this episode, we are hosting Peter Mulholland. Peter was involved in many game projects. I'm pretty sure you know Foundation, Simon the Sorcerer 2, Knights and Merchants, Shattered Kingdom, Feeble Files. He was working with RuneSoft and Epic Interactive as well. Welcome, Peter. Right, so, Peter, tell us more about your computer background. What was your first machine? What was your first computer experience?
First computer would have been ZX Spectrum plus 2, and that would have been, I think I got that Christmas 87, I think was when I got that. So, I think I was about 7 years old. And the main reason I got that was basically my friends had them, so that was the main reason. My friends had them, so I was didn't want to be the odd one out.
I think Spectrum was pretty popular in the UK at that time.
Yeah. I mean, they were certainly one of the cheaper options. I mean, the Commodore 64, by relative comparison, was quite expensive. So I think a lot of us had Spectrums, and then of course, obviously, with Sinclair. But by the time I got one, obviously Amstrad had bought them out, so the Plus 2 was one of Amstrad's models. It was the Spectrum 128 with a built-in cassette deck, so not a bad little machine as I remember it. So really good fun with that, and they got me where I am now.
Very good. That was how it went with a lot of people, to just to get what your friends had, so you could swap games and all that. That's what drove computer sales.
Yeah, funnily enough, I think the next Christmas, what I wanted was a hi-fi with a double cassette deck for some reason. Yeah, I can't think of why that could be.
Yeah. And so, how did you get into game development? And you were doing some ports as well. And how did you get involved in that?
Well, in development bit, I guess just as a kid I got sort of bored with the games that I had, and it's been sort of a scientific person anyway, because I do electronics as a hobby as well, and I always tinkered about with electronics as a kid as well. And I just thought, well, how do people, how do these guys make computers do all this stuff anyway? And I'd seen the word programming on like credits for games. I'd seen programming, so I had a word to go on, and I looked at the instruction manual, and of course in the instruction manual you always had a section on basic programming. So I started with that. I started typing the examples in and messing about with them, and it just went from there. And some of my friends as well sort of got a little bit interested as well, but I was the one who sort of really picked it up and really understood it. But I think a lot of us wanted to make games. We all had ideas for games. We had ideas, we'd write ideas down, but we were just kids really, so we didn't get much done. I think I might have got like a Space Invaders type game I got written in BASIC, and I think another one was like the game in BASIC, so it was really clunky and slow, but worked. And the interest picked up from there, and then I wanted the machine I really wanted. I think I wanted, after seeing it in the magazines, was the Amiga. You used to see the screenshots of Amiga games on the back of the games boxes for the Spectrum. You used to see the screenshots for the Amiga, and they just, wow, it's amazing. It's arcade-like graphics, and you used to see in magazines, and I think a lot of the software shops as well that I went into in Liverpool, they would always have Amigas out. And I remember particularly that there was one game that I saw running in a shop. Well, it wasn't actually the game, it was the title screen, and it was Shadow of the Beast.
Oh yeah.
That's scrolling on Shadow of the Beast, and I must have only been about 10 or something, but I knew, looking at that, and I knew from what you could do on the Spectrum, I knew the serious amount of power and hardware going on with that screen, and I wanted one. But they were too expensive, and I didn't get an Amiga until quite late. I think it was 94 4, I think, by the time I got one. I know it was the year that Amiga format had Amos on the cover disc that I got one. So that worked out quite well, because I got the Amiga and then I got Amos and started. And yeah, it just kind of went from there. I did a lot on the Amiga as, just mainly hobbyist stuff, just messing about with Amos Basic. I got bored of Amos and decided to teach myself assembly language. And from there I started mainly messing about in other people's programs, reverse engineering things and stuff like that. And to the point where I met Paul Berkey on IRC. And he lived in Liverpool as well, so went to meet him and had a chat and talked about programming and more programming. He'd done Foundation by then, and I'd read. He wrote a series of articles in Amiga format. So I was kind of keen to get to know him for that reason, because he'd had commercial success. And I knew his PD games as well, as he did things like Sneetch and Pegit and stuff like that, so I knew him from those. And so he was kind of the celebrity, really.
Mm-hmm. And Peter, what would you consider your own first kind of project or accomplishment on the Amiga? Whether it's a personal one with Amos or something else, what would you consider your kind of beginning on the Amiga?
I think the first thing I really wrote that I finished was actually it was a music playback program. I didn't have the internet, but I should get lots of different types of music files, in all the various formats that the Amiga had. Like, you had mod files, but you had custom tunes, like David Whittaker had his own format, and all those different formats. And this was before I'd heard of Deli Player or Eagle Player. I hadn't heard of any of them, so I always thought to myself, wouldn't it be better if we had a music player where the interface program was one part, and then the methods to deal with all the different formats were like libraries that would add into the main program. So I wrote one because I had a few play routines kicking about from various formats. A friend of mine had the internet, and we had an internet cafe in Liverpool, so I could go on and browse AmiNet. But I don't know why I didn't come across Deli Tracker or Eagle Player at that time. No idea why. So I wrote my own. Trying to remember what it was called. Sonic Player, I think I called it. And was also learn intuition, user interface stuff, and a lot. I didn't have the official documentation either. I just had, again, from a PD disc, I think I had a rip-off of Amiga development manuals. What were they called? The RKMs. I had rip-off versions of those on disc, and I didn't have any proper documentation. I reverse engineered some other people's programs to see how were they poking things, how were they making intuition user interfaces and stuff like that. So I did it with that, basically disassemble things with DevPack, and that was the first program I made, and it's long gone now. It didn't get out. It's just me and my friends had it, and it didn't get out, so it's long gone. But that was the first thing I finished. I was quite proud to finish that as well. So, and then I saw Deli Player and thought, oh,
yeah. And so the Amiga game development scene, what was that like in the late 90s? Can you tell me? Because I know you worked with Paul Berkey, and there was still some life in the market.
There was still a lot of people very passionate about the Amiga, but commercially, all the big players had sort of started to move on. I mean, I think especially by the time Commodore went under, I think a lot of them just thought it's game over, and I think they were getting more into moving on to consoles anyway. But there were still a few people out there, and Foundation was one of the things was fairly well, and Paul seemed to be doing all right out of it, and I think the only sort of the blip he had was it was originally published by the Sadness, they were called. And they disappeared, basically. They went bust and disappeared. and owed him some money. Like, what am I going to do? And I think this was around the time of World of Amiga 99. I think that, it was that year, World of Amiga 99, and I had sort of gotten involved with another guy, and they were going to develop, it was kind of like a Command and Conquer type game they wanted to develop, and we had it somewhat in progress, and they were going to basically, what they were going to do, the guy was doing the Amiga version, but they wanted it on Windows as well, and that was where I sort of came in. I had experience with the Amiga, and I had been learning how to do stuff on Windows, so I got involved, and we went to 99, which was kind of a big event for me. It was the only one I went to, and it turned out the guys who were really shit were Blittersoft. So I went, and Paul also decided to come along, and while Paul was there, he met heading of Epic Interactive, and he just happened to say to Thomas that Sadness had gone under, and Thomas basically said, "Oh well, do you want a new publisher for Foundation?" So that's where that happened. And unfortunately, the Command and Conquer game kind of went by the wayside. And not long after, I think Blittersoft decided to call it quits on the Amiga. But the other thing that Blittersoft were funding at the time was the Amiga port of Wipeout 2097.
Yeah.
So, and we were there on the stand with the guys who'd done Wipeout 2097. And the biggest thing there, because they had this really big, really expanded Amiga running it, with PowerPC and what was that graphics chip? Hamidia graphics, was it?
Yeah, Cyberstorm PPC.
Yeah, all of that.
Cybervision PPC, yeah.
Sounds about right, yeah. And I heard about it and I thought, oh god, come on, this is going to run like a bag of hammers. And I saw it running, and I must admit I was impressed. But what kept happening was people kept coming up to the stand, and tables with sort of like a drape over them. And people were coming up to the stand, and they were lifting the drape on the table and looking under the table because they wanted to make sure there wasn't a PlayStation underneath plugged into the Amiga like that. So, but yeah, it was good fun. It was also my first time in London as well, so it was quite exciting. And so it was good fun, and I met a lot of people who I knew on IRC. I met a lot of them there. In fact, funny enough, I met my current girlfriend then as well. That was the first time I met her. So, so she was with somebody else at the time, but yeah, that's where we met. We got to know each other, and it was good. It was good fun. It was. We went into the conference that they had. Was it Jim Collis, I think? Yeah,
that's right, at the time.
And we went in because they had the prototype, or the mock-ups of the Walker. They had prototypes of the Walker. Yeah, that might have been the Walker. They had prototypes. They had a fancy monitor to go with it as well, styled monitor and stuff. They had mock-ups of all of it. And then we went into the conference, and I think that was the conference where they announced what they were going to do for the operating system. They dumped QNX, and they were going towards Linux, and I think at that point a lot of people went, ugh. So, because QNX was seriously I was impressed with that OS. It was really good. I mean, the fact that they got a whole web browser and everything onto one floppy disk on a PC was brilliant. And I thought, that's Amiga philosophy. That's kickstart, and it's compact and efficient. And then they decided to go to Linux, and it's like, okay. But I remember we watched that conference, and we were thinking a lot of promises here, but we were like, will they deliver? And of course they didn't. And so point, we'd had obviously Commodore went under, and then I think SCOM were not quite sure what SCOM were trying to do, but I think they overreached, didn't they? And then they went under, and I think it was at that point I personally decided, no, it's not going to come back from that. But, well, bits and bobs happened as we'll go on, and I'll say. So I've rambled on enough for that one, so there you go.
Nice, really nice. At that time, late 90s, another operating system for NG Amigas was evolving. It was called the MorphOS. Did you have any contact with MorphOS or, for example, Amiga OS.4?
Well, with MorphOS we did. I mean, after I think we'd done Simon 2 and we'd done Feeble Files, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
And they started getting interested, and we heard about, I think they got in touch with Epic first. Basically said, looked at, we had some idea of what we'd been reading it in the press, and I was like, oh yeah. Well, one of the things we'd done with both Simon 2 and Feeble already was we knew we were going to want Mac versions as well as Amiga. One of the ideas Paul had was to write a library which would give us a standard interface for graphics and sound and input and all the other things, but it would be in a library, so you'd write the game on top of the library, and then you write the library to the target machine. And somebody else did that and called it SDL, but we thought of it first. we called it, well, Paul called it Dexter, and it was after Dexter's Labs, but it was, I think he got the idea for the name from being ambidextrous. You could work with either hand, and he'd just had his first kid by then, and I think he was enjoying watching cartoons more than his young son was. So he liked Dexter's Lab, so he got the idea from Dexter for that. And documentation as well, and in the documentation in HTML he had a little Dexter logo, Dexter from Dexter's Lab and all of it. But that's what we did anyway. We did this platform library, and so we had an Amiga version, we had a Mac OS version, we actually had a Windows version as well. So for example, we could do things like, for example, with Simon the Sorcerer 2, a lot of that game was actually in Intel assembly language. I think it come from, in the days of Simon 1, it was a similar engine, and he'd written that. The guy who programmed that had written most of that in assembly language, including all the graphics routines were all in assembly language because you had to get the speed. My big job on Simon 2 was to take all of that assembly language. It must have been about % of the game was in assembly language, and sort of had the mindset for assembly language as it is. So although I'd done 68,000 on the Amiga, I'd never actually done any Intel assembly language. So the first thing I said to Paul was, well, we need to get like a reference book or something. We get a reference book and I can learn what the instructions are and what they do. I'll be able to get along. So we went to Liverpool Central Library, and eventually we found a book on, I think this book was so old that it mentioned the 486 being the new chip. So, but it was enough to get me going, and I think I've actually still got that book somewhere. I don't think we ever gave it back. So I think Paul ended up paying a fine on it or something. So.
Sorry, I was going to ask you what was the? I mean, that sounds fairly involved. What was the most complicated porting job you had to do?
I'd say it was probably Simon 2 and then Feeble Files, which were both sort of based on the same engine. Feeble Files was based on Simon 2, and it had been expanded a lot. They'd done stuff like they'd shoved Smacker video into it. Was the main thing they'd done with Feeble Files. They'd shoved Smacker videos into it and come up with a system to do video. We couldn't license Smacker; it was too expensive, and of course we needed a format that we could use on all the platforms. So, Paul sorted that one out. Well, I did a lot of the assembly language work, recoding from assembly language into C code that we could use across platforms. And I was using the Windows version of our library that we'd written. I was using the Windows version a lot because it allowed me to work in stages. I could still have some assembly language running and some of the new C functions running. And along the way, we tried, when we finally had everything in C onto the target platform. I think, for both Simon and Feeble, we started with the Amiga on those. I think Feeble might have been done on the Mac actually, but Simon 2 was definitely Amiga first. We definitely went with Amiga first on Simon 2.
Very good. Were you involved with any other companies at that stage?
Not at that stage, no. In fact, what I'd done was I did intend to go to university, and I had gone into university to do a programming course. Rubbish. It was just, it seemed to me like it was still stuck in the 70s, and I hated it. And I hated it. And after about a month doing that and sort of sitting there learning C, and just thought, am I here getting into debt? Taking a student loan out and getting into debt. I thought, this is rubbish. So I quit. I quit uni, and I was in a rather bad mood because I thought my parents are going to have a go at me here and everything. So I went into a bar in Liverpool. I don't drink, and I never went into bars. I went into a bar and I phoned Paul and I told him, I said, come round to your house for a few hours. My parents are going to go nuts. And he said, I got a better idea. Where are you? And I told him I was in this bar, and he said, right, come into the city and we can have a chat and a drink. And funny enough, he came into the city and then mentioned Simon too. So that was how that got started.
Okay, listen. So you were at the time with RuneSoft and Epic, yeah. So what was the most uplifting experience? You mentioned Simon the Sorcerer too. Was there any what was the most uplifting and positive experience for you while porting these games? What was the breakthrough,
I think it was mainly I was earning money and I was doing what I wanted to. I was working in games development, and all through doing Simon 2 I had my mum going on at me, oh, you quit university now, oh, you'll have to get a proper job, and no. And I used to say to her, Mum, I'm working on something here. And she said, yeah, right, well, you'll still have to get a proper job and earn some money. And then Simon 2 got finished, and we released that on Amiga, and it was a big success. I think a lot of people wanted to see the second. And getting paid and buying a new PC. And my mum was, oh, where have you got the money to buy this new computer from? And I said, I told you, we're working on stuff with a bit. And she said, oh, right, okay. Well, you still have to get a proper job. So,
yeah, parents.
But it was like I was making money doing what I wanted to do, and it was on my own terms. And yeah, and it was kind of like everyone had said, no, you need qualifications. And I was like, look at that, I know what I'm doing. So I did it, and that was it. I did it with Paul. I did it. I was working on commercial games, and at first, it was porting other people's games, but the long-term plan for me and Paul was we'd port some games, raise some money, and then get on to doing some original things. So Paul's motivation, he wanted to get to doing original stuff.
But Peter, are you still in touch with Paul?
I am, yes, although we haven't spoken for a while, but I am still in touch with him, yeah.
Okay.
I'm just thinking back about something you said earlier about, when you were some of the more complex port, you were kind of, transposing, say, from assembly language on one machine, which is basically coded to the bare metal of one machine, to another, either API or another platform. Is there any stage where you're kind of doing so much, making so much change that you're practically rewriting the game?
it was probably like that in the early days, especially, funnily enough, with the original game code that was in C. We had a lot of sort of issues where one C compiler would do one thing and another C compiler would do something else. And often found ourselves reworking code just to make sure that we got the same results on every compiler. But in terms of writing the games, I had to try and explain this to my girlfriend once, because she said she didn't really get what it was I was doing. And I said, it's basically this: you're rewriting code so it does the same process, but it's just in a different language. So if you think of it kind of like language translation, from like English to French or whatever else, it's kind of like that in a way. You're not so much rewriting code as so much as the code is still doing the same thing. It's just the representation of how that is different from assembly language to C. In terms of API stuff, well, yeah, again, sort of got done largely the same way, especially with these older games, which were just largely 2D. So really, a lot of the machine-specific stuff was pretty much stuff like, in terms of graphics, it was set the display in this resolution with this color depth, and then give me a buffer to write into. But so it's saying in the case of Simon Sorcerer 2, I think it was like 320 by 240 in 256 colors, so 8-bit. So on the side, it was pretty much, they had routines to set the graphics display into 320 by 240 8-bit depth, and then here's where the graphics memory starts. So your graphics data into this buffer, and then something, and that flipped to flip it onto the screen. So when we were writing the library, we just basically made an API which would represent this functionality just in a common way, and then we sort of had experience of what the end machines would have to do. So we just sort of made bridge the gap in effect. I mean, on Windows we knew we had like DirectX, and it was still largely like Direct Draw was the thing then for 2D. On the Mac, what did they have? Sprockets or something it was called at the time. I think they called it Sprockets, which was a similar thing. It was a way to, you had a window and then you could write into quickly. With the Amiga, it was obviously we had an intuition window, and then I think we used the CyberGrafx API. I think we used CyberGrafx because both of the systems, there was Picasa 96 and CyberGrafx, I think was it, and they both supported CyberGrafx as API, so we used CyberGrafx. The same thing with sound. With sound on the Windows or the DOS version, I think the DOS version of the game used a library. I think it was Miles Sound System they used. On the Mac, there was Sound Manager or something, API. On the Amiga, we used AHI or ACHI, or however you pronounce that. So yeah, and so that's how we wrote our library, and then we were taking machine-specific bits out of the game and retargeting them towards our library. So I don't think it ever got to the point where we were rewriting it felt like it sometimes, I mean, especially with Simon 2, because so much of that was in assembly language. But I wouldn't say we were rewriting. It was really following what the original programmer had done and just sort of adapting it towards, like, all that assembly code would have C code, which did exactly the same thing, but in C. And then it would just be removing the machine-specific stuff and targeting that towards our library.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did optimize along the way. We had to optimize some things along the way as well. So, but yeah, but what stood me in good stead for doing it was I'd done a lot, obviously, on fiddling about in other people's code, reverse engineering other people's code, and that really came in handy because I'd already sort of mindset, as what I used to say to Paul was, you have to try and get into the head of the guy who programmed the original. You've got to sort of analyze the code and what was he thinking when he wrote this code, and you've got to sort of get into that sort of headspace. And yeah, it was it was a really good challenge, especially when you had a routine and you couldn't see what it was doing, and you were like sitting there looking at it and thinking, what the hell is this doing, and how's that doing that? And then you have a aha moment. See, I understand it. That was the fun part, and it was kind of fun. The Amiga had quite a vibrant community at the time. It was kind of fun to be involved.
Thinking about the various projects you were working on, what kind of beta testing was involved there? Did you have a big bank of beta testers, or was it just the developers, or what way did it work?
It was basically, it was us and friends, and Thomas at Epic had a few friends, and I think when it was more with the Amiga stuff, I think we did get sort of volunteers would volunteer to test for us. Yeah, it was basically we were playing it, and I think the thing was as well, these games were sort of still small enough that you could complete them yourself. And with Simon and Feeble, we had the walkthroughs. We had the walkthroughs to the entire game, so we would play them. That was mainly because if it was going to crash, we wanted it to crash on our machines, to the debugger, and see where it crashed and exactly what everything was in the state was. Whereas if it's crashing on a tester's machine, they just say, "Oh, it's crashed."
It crashed.
At this point, I did this and it crashed, and then you've got to replicate that anyway. So you've got to play. So it's still pretty much the same. It's still pretty much been the same, even when I went on to virtual programming and we did more complicated stuff and we did have testers. We would still need to say, right, what exactly did you do? How exactly did you get it to crash and get a save game or something? And then the bugger is usually when it crashes on their machine and it doesn't crash on yours. So, and then you're totally screwed. It was largely just testing. It was friends and employees basically. But
right, and apart from all those projects that you finished, were there any unfinished games, unfinished projects, or unfinished things, so-called, for example, games that weren't?
Let me see, there was a few projects we started doing at Epic that never finished. One was Earth 2160, I think. 2150. Might have been Earth 2150. Earth 2150, we got the source code, a lot of the source code, and we had started working on that. We were trying to get we were trying to get it to build on our own machines under Windows first. We always went from the source code and because quite often, especially with the older games, you got the source code and it was bit rot basically. You would load up the project and project files wouldn't load, or stuff wouldn't compile properly, and bits were missing, and we had to sort of get a workable building version going first. Because things like source management weren't commonly used. It's not like now everything's in Subversion or Git. To be honest, a lot of the time it wasn't used. I think there was only one game where I can ever remember us working on. I can't remember which one it was, and they were using CVS because we saw the CVS folders. We found those, but most of the games no source management. So you got either a CD-ROM full of stuff, which is what we got for Simon 2 and Feeble. We got a CD-ROM, which was a hard disk dump of somebody's machine. It was just all sorts in there. You get a zip file full of source code. So I think Earth 2150. That's one I do remember, and I seem to remember we were working on it. We had bits missing. We would get the bits. We were getting there, and then suddenly, was it Topware? I think somebody at Topware decided, no, actually, we don't want you doing this, or you're not paying enough money, or something, some business reason anyway, and it got canned. So, I think another funny one. This is kind of a bit of fail on RuneSoft's behalf. We get Simon the Sorcerer 3D. We did actually get that game to do, but when did the license for the code, we got the code and hang on, there's a big chunk missing here. And what they'd done, they developed the game on a thing called Netimers, and I think Netimers became Gamebryo. They hadn't licensed the engine. So we had the game code, but we didn't have the 3D engine. And we sort of said to Thomas, is that important? We were like, we've got the game, no engine. That's like having a Ferrari, not having the engine, not having the,
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, that was it. And he was like, well, can't we write our own? I think the thing was, he was familiar with licensing games which were where you had complete ownership on the technology.
Yeah.
So the game would be its own custom engine or its own custom code, and if you license the source code for the game, you've got everything. There might be a sound library or something that was an add-in that you could replace, but in this case, it was the 3D engine, and he simply didn't realise that it's like a major puzzle piece, and without that, we couldn't do the game.
Ouch.
So. I don't know whether he paid for it. He'd already paid for it or what, but I didn't get involved in that. We just basically said, look, we can't do it. No 3D engine. And there was no source code license for that 3D engine either, so we couldn't have done it even if we'd wanted to. So
what was the last Amiga-related project that you worked on that you to completion? And it doesn't have to be a commercial one.
I think it was probably Knights and Merchants. And I know that we weren't sure whether we were going to release it. But I'm not sure whether we did it in the end for the classic Amiga OS. I think we only did that one only for MorphOS. And I think the main reason we did it was because we'd rewritten it all for the Mac already. Very little needed to get it to run on the Amiga. There were some videos, but to be honest, the videos in it were rubbish, and I think we just cut them out rather than really poor quality anyway, so they skipped them anyway. So I think it was Knights and Merchants. Yep. At that time as well, the community, this was the whole thing where I was mentioning MorphOS, we had what they used to call it, the red camp and the blue camp. OS 4 in the red camp and MorphOS in the blue camp, and there's just so much vicious vitriol going on between the two, being thrown backwards and forwards, and it just got so hostile. At one point there was people who were back in OS 4 were saying things like, pirate all the games that are MorphOS only, stuff like that, and we were. I think by that time Thomas Stiding had enough. He just said, right, screw it. Sales were becoming less and less and less, and the community was getting just more and more hostile, and we sod it basically. It's not worth the effort. I think at that point Paul was getting a bit fed up and bored of doing porting as well, I think. So we decided to move on. We moved on to just the Mac basically.
Fair enough. Yeah. If you had the time and inclination, what would you like to port to the Amiga nowadays?
Really don't know. I think the big problem is just. What kind of Amiga are you talking about? The old ones or the ones?
Well, I suppose be fairly modern software. So let's say a beefed up Amiga. Open it up.
For a start, a lot of games now. Through you require pretty serious graphics hardware, so to try and do anything like that on the Amiga is just really not feasible. There just isn't the hardware there. I don't know, I've not really thought about it. I suppose what might be suitable, some of the mobile games perhaps, but even they can get pretty 3D heavy. The GPU and their typical powerful now, so that's a tricky question to answer. Even on stuff which looks 2D, there's a lot of GPU usage going on in the background, because now everything that's 2D now is pretty much 3D. It's just flat rectangles instead of no perspective projection going on, but it's still a 3D process.
Yeah.
Because you can use the 3D to do like alpha blending and
the
all
lighting
sorts of
and all
things.
that, yeah.
Lighting and even like pixel shaders and fragment shaders you can do for all sorts of particle effects that you couldn't have just done with just a regular 2D blitter. Would have been too much work, but with 3D and a lot is possible. So yeah, I'm really not sure about that one. So
fair enough.
Do you still attend any Amiga meetings?
Well, I do. Yeah, recently we've just recently, really, isn't it? We've had Norwich Amiga Group because I live in Norwich now, and that's been it's been good to go to that. It's also helpful for me because I have a lot of trouble lately with depression and anxiety, and to get out and into a group of people where I sort of feel very comfortable and I've got common subject matter and common interests with, it's been really helpful. And it's nice to see that the machines are still sort of being used and people still find them interesting. And it's it's certainly one part of my history which I'm really glad I had the opportunity to experience. Because the Amiga was a brilliant machine, and I was absolutely gutted when it went under, and when it became time, it was like obvious now that it's over. The Amiga's dead. Well, commercially it was dead, and I accepted it and moved on to the PC. It was still frustrating because I don't think I still felt the Amiga OS. I felt things missing, and I think I felt that way right until Windows 2000 was released. I think when Windows 2000 came out, I was like, right, got it. They finally got Windows up to par with where it was on the Amiga, and I think that was when I sort of stopped so much. But the Norwich Amiga Group has been great. It's been great to get into that, and there's a more vibrant scene going on for the Amiga now than there was back in the late 90s, early 2000s when I was working on it. And there is still a bit of vitriol, there is still people fighting, but it's a lot less. I mean, towards the end, fighting was just ridiculous. It was sad to see, and it was just completely non-productive, and I think it just drove most people away.
Absolutely. And you can still find it if you know where to look, definitely.
Oh yeah.
or who to ask.
Yeah.
But
the Phase 5 guy springs to mind.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's a whole other.
I just skip those threads. I just
Yeah, I think the thing
go
for
on,
me as
go on.
I think the thing for me is like, as well as because I have electronics experience and I've done hardware engineering. And he said he's going to put the old accelerator designs back into production. I was like, oh, I thought you haven't got a clue what you're talking about. I mean, you're talking about 20-year-old designs. Most of the parts will be obsolete. Especially like all the gate array stuff that would have been used to implement the logic on the... Never mind the processors themselves are obsolete. All the gate array logic, the FPGAs and so on, they're all well obsolete. 5-volt logic is pretty much obsolete. And then the other thing is now, of course, everything now is ROHS, it's lead-free, which if you were selling commercially, you would have to adhere to. And even if you could source the old processors, the old FPGAs, the old components, to have a nightmare trying to comply with ROHS, because that stuff has got lead in it just by... It's not just the solder, the components have got lead in, and that all comes under ROHS compliance. It's just, even if you could get the hardware, it's not commercially viable to do it. It would be more commercially viable to design a new accelerator, but this guy is insistent he's going to release. And, well...
He's been insistent for several years at this stage, I think.
It's just, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and he's... I'm not going to go there because he likes to report people and sue people as well.
There's no need to, really.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah.
All I can say is, as somebody with technical experience, what he's saying is not feasible. It's as simple as that.
let's just move on and focus on something more positive.
Well, I can relate to the meetings being a nice break from the online activity. They're definitely my favourite part. But when you do use your Amiga, Peter, what kind of stuff do you get up to these days?
Well, I've actually only just started to get one back together.
Ooh, good.
Yeah, and it's come from, actually where it's come from is, I had all my Amigas in the loft. I had my original 1200. I had those in the loft.
Oh, nice.
I had 2 more machines that I'd picked up from somewhere along the way. I think it was friends who were getting rid of them and didn't sell them, because this is why I never sold them back then. They were going for like 20 quid. Mm-hmm. I thought, I had such a good time with these machines, 20 quid, and some kid's just going to wreck it and then it's going to get thrown in the bin. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't part with them, so they stayed at my parents' place for years. And interested in them, admittedly, I got more interested in them at first because I sort of realised, hang on, they're worth money now. That was the thing at first. It's like, hang on, they're worth a lot of money now. And I got familiar with like the hardware side of things, that they needed recapping because the capacitors go bad and they need recapping. And I thought, well, yeah, I thought I could do that. I'd recap all my own machines because I know what I'm doing. I can read it. I can do stuff, and just got back into it. And then the Norwich Amiga group came along, and I just sort of got. It was the memories all sort of started coming back. The things we used to do with the Amiga. I thought, okay, well, I am still planning to sell most of my Amigas once I've refurbished them, but I'm going to keep one. Decided I'm going to keep one, and I've got an 03040 accelerator with it, so I'm going to keep that one. But I'm still getting back into it at the moment, and it is like the hardest thing was getting software onto it, because I haven't got any disk drives. I haven't got a disk drive in my PC anymore, so that used to be the way with you download stuff onto MS-DOS disks, and DOS on the Amiga was how I used to get stuff in the Internet Cafe. I haven't got that, and I set up a serial cable from the D to the Amiga, and I remember that's how I backed up my Amiga originally before I shut it off and went to the PC. I had a serial cable. I borrowed somebody's Surf Squirrel, and I basically made one big LHA archive and sent it over X modem or something from, I think it was Encom on the Amiga and Hyperterminal on Windows, and I sent the file out, and it took forever. But yeah, so that's how I started getting started again. Now I've been sending stuff terminal program over serial, and it's like 5k a second, and it's just as well. All the software is really small. So, but Lucas has kindly given me a network card.
Ah, yes.
My pleasure. I hope it works
difference.
really well with the TCP IP stack. That should be a bit quicker than 5K.
Yeah, I got AMI TCP working. It doesn't help that the installer is wrong and doesn't configure it correctly, but I figured it out. Yeah,
Brilliant.
So I've got FTP set up and there's FTP stuff to the Amiga now.
Luke is on a mission to have the entire Amiga community connected to the internet.
I am. Trust me, I am. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be quicker than 5K. You should be getting speeds around like 500 kb over FTP. Yeah.
I'd be interested to see what I can get through the clock port, which is...
Oh, yeah. This is our next question, because there is going to be a question regarding hardware projects as well. So, hold your horses for a sec. Okay.
Yeah, it's been good fun. It's been good fun getting that up again. It's been a little bit of scratching, head scratches. Oh, how did I do this? And how did this used to work? And what did I used to have installed? And one of the first things I got was Cygnaced. I got Cygnaced because that was what I used to use for programming. I used to use Cygnaced. I used to have Cygnaced driving FPAC assembler. I think I wrote a little tool to sort of go between Cygnaced and FPAC. I could hit a function key and it would run the assembler. So it's kind of like an IDE before IDEs existed. So
yeah. Yeah, no, you're not alone in that kind of stuff. You see an awful lot of people on the forums and the Facebook groups and everywhere, basically just getting back into it. And it's like you say, it's quite vibrant at the moment, and more so than it was, say, 10, 20 or 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. I might have a go at doing some assembly level hardware programming as well.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just for fun, basically. See what I can remember. If I can remember how to like use the blitter and stuff like that, and copper lists and all that.
All the fun stuff. If you had a favorite game on the Amiga, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think the one game that stands out in my memory that I played a demo of it on Amiga format, and I thought, I've got to buy it, I've got to get this for Christmas, was Hired Guns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Hired Guns. That was, I think everything about that game was just amazing at the time. The soundtrack was amazing. I used to have my Amiga plugged into a hi-fi, and the soundtrack on that game just sounded amazing through a hi-fi. And I think there's just such a depth of immersion, because obviously this was before 3D games, like it was way before Doom or whatever came out. Just such a depth of immersion because of the way that it was like 3D, but obviously with 2D, but 3D. There was just such an immersion in that game. It was just brilliant. It was just definitely just a big sticker in my mind as that game. It was brilliant. It's probably that, and then if I had to pick a second, it'd probably be Worms.
Of course.
Worms was brilliant.
Classic.
Yeah.
Kindred spirits there between the two of you.
That was actually one of the things I installed. I found my Worms Director's Cut discs, and I thought, I bet you these don't work. It did. I installed. That was one of the first things I installed on the hard drive. As soon as I got a hard drive to work with the Amiga, it was one of the first things I installed. I actually put a picture up on my Facebook page of the original and the best version of Worms, because I played the new versions. I don't like them. I think they've just gone too far. They've built the franchise a bit too much, and so they've lost the essence of what the game was about.
Right. Here comes the question regarding hardware then. Have you ever been involved in any hardware projects? I mean, like past, present, or will you be involved in any hardware projects?
Right, well, not in the past I haven't, although I used to do some modifications
okay.
One of the common things was, of course, back then is getting a hard drive, and nobody wanted to buy 2.5-inch drives because they were expensive. So everybody was basically buying 3.5-inch drives and then stuffing them into the case. So I used to do things like that for some people. I used to. I think the first time a friend of mine got an accelerator for the first time, and he was very nervous about fitting it because he was like, what if I kill it with static, or what if I connect it wrong and blow the Amiga up? And I was like, well, I've got an anti-static wristband, and I know what I'm doing with electronics, so here we go. And so I think this is the same friend. At one point he wanted an Amiga and he wanted his PC, and he didn't have a lot of room because he was in his parents' front room. So he said, is there any way we could put the two together? We bought a big full height tower case, and I modified the case so that we could have a PC motherboard in there and the main board out of the A1200. It was all powered off the same power supply, and it had he had a keyboard adapter to use a PC keyboard with the A1200, and I rigged up a way of making it switchable between the PC and the Amiga with a switch on the front. You flick a switch and it would. I don't remember. I think he lived with having two mice, because I don't think I put much then. But and then I also had it so the sound from the Amiga came out and went into the line-in Sound Blaster card that he had in the PC. So he called it Locutus above. Yeah, and that was one thing. It's just gluing that together, really. Hardware projects now. Well, I've actually got sort of up of being involved in software engineering because it's kind of drudgery nowadays, and plus I've had to leave my job because of depression and anxiety thing that I've mentioned earlier. And when I started getting back into Amigas, so the first thing I thought was, well, yeah, I can get mine back in order. But it was when I started going to the Norwich Amiga group, so people started asking me, "Oh, you do electronics? Can you recap Amigas?" And I was like, "I can." And they, "Oh, could you do mine? Because I don't really want to send it away. I don't want to send it to post." Or I think Lucas was particularly keen at first because he's remember him saying to me, "Oh," he said, "Did you take the modulator out of my Amiga so I can fit the in-division graphics thing or something?"
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, you could put the HDMI port there or the VGA.
Yeah.
It is. Did you take that out? And it's like, hey, so there's people interested and talked me into it eventually. He said, "Well, how about doing local repairs?" And he talked me into it. I thought, yeah, in the end, I thought, why not? Yeah, because what I like is I like to see that these machines are still being used and enjoyed by people. And that was the main thing why I was going to sell my Amigas first, because I thought it wasn't just the money aspect of it. I mean, I did, but I also thought it would be better if these machines were out there being used by people who want to use them and enjoying them. It's better that than them sitting going to rot in my loft, which is what they would do otherwise. And I'd originally planned to sell all of them, but now I'm going to keep one. So so that's it. Basically, I'm just getting my I have a spare room at my house that and at the moment it looks like a bomb's hit it. There's stuff everywhere. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it tidied out, and I've got some new desk workbenches to fit around, and basically I'm going to get it fitted out for proper electronics work. And then I'm going to start doing recaps on Amigas and some repairs as well, probably some repairs, and because there's things again. I've been to the sorts of the meetings, and it's like, oh, this doesn't work on an Amiga, and I look at it and go, oh, that's easy, that'd be easy enough to fix. And there seems to be a call for it in the area, and people really don't want to put their Amigas through the couriers, because of course couriers smash things up, and so there's sort of call for people doing it locally. Because I think in this area, the nearest guy that was doing it was in Cambridge. I think that was Keir Fraser was doing it in Cambridge.
Yeah, you're right.
I think he's stopped now. I think he's too busy, so there'll be me in the future, so I'll start doing that. And as I said, I'm getting back into doing electronics anyway, and just as I sort of looked at the things, looking at the Facebook group, what a lot of people wanted was they wanted network connectivity, and it seemed to me that it was either things like people were trying to buy, old portable PCMCIA cards or whatever, or buying all sorts of things, or they were using serial, slip, they were using or parallel cables. And I thought to myself, I know for a fact there are Ethernet chips out there which are designed to be easy to interface to. They've got, at the hardware level, they're not PCI or anything like that complicated. You've got a basic 16 or 8 or 16-bit interface that you could drive from any processor, any microcontroller or any processor. And I thought, well, why hasn't somebody done one of these network cards sets for the Amiga? The duck port would do. A lot of people would like Ethernet in their A1200. I just started thinking about it. I thought, you've got that expansion space under the floppy drive, haven't you, where the linking plate there and everything. I thought, there, just based on one of these single chip network chipsets, and it only needs to be 100 megabit, and the speeds, you're not going to get full speed out of it, but you're not going to get full speed out of an Amiga anyway with Ethernet, no matter what you do. I thought, and because you see as well, the PCMCI cards sticking out the side of people's machines, and they're awkward. And I know you can get like an adapter now which turns it 90 degrees and so on, but I thought it'd be better in the machine. And I thought, why has nobody done this? It's not complicated. And so I thought to be a good business, so I thought, why not? And I got the data sheet for one of the chips, and I looked at it and I thought, right, need logic chips and then the main interfacing was 3.3 volt stuff to 5 volts. The 5 volts in the Amiga to 3.3 volts. So I thought that's easy enough to do. The more and more I looked at it, I thought, yeah, that was hooked straight up to the clock port, and I thought you need to do a PCB, and there's the hardware, and then it's just writing a driver. I thought that's where the work is writing a driver.
Bit, yeah.
But I thought, all right, hardware, and then the more and more I thought about it, I thought, well, just to program these machines, I've written a 2 or whatever it is network driver before, and somebody mentioned to me, the driver for the 3Com PCMCIA cards is open source.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, oh right, so basically I thought, I could go and get that and have a look, and yeah, so that was it. It just sort of went from there. And yeah, from my point of view, the motivation really is just to get some design experience with electronics, because I don't have any qualifications. I thought, if I'm going to get a job in electronics, I sort of need to have stuff I can show people I've done. Thought, so I could do this, and it's, even though it's a retro computer, it's I suppose you could put that down as it's a design limitation that had to be overcome, as interfacing with the 5 volt logic on the Amiga is a sort of design challenge. I thought it could just be a fun little project to do. I mean, and then if there's anyone wants to buy them, because these days you can pretty much just do a design a circuit board, a board house in China to the board for you, and then if you want, you can even get the board house in China to make them with all the components on. And so I thought, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So thought, yeah, get set up for it and give it a shot. And I mean, and if nobody wants to buy them, well, just make the design open source and somebody else can build them or whatever, or they can just be out there to people to build. I'll probably will try and sell them at first, just because it'll be nice to make a bit of money on them and put that into other projects. So it just seems like a fundamental need. It's like what Terrible Fire has been saying about his accelerators that he's been designing. I watch his videos, and he's said that people keep asking him to put all sorts of bells and whistles on it, and he gets insane amounts of feature requests, and he's like, no, I don't really want to do all that stuff. I want to get he wants to get a base line of important stuff that most Amiga users want to an affordable accelerator. And I just thought, I know at the moment you can get PCMCIA cards, you can get them fairly cheaply, but they're not being made anymore. So it's find them where you can. It's like run the gauntlet of eBay, and I just thought, why not? It's about time the Amiga had a network card that was designed specifically for it and would go into the machine and be usable and give decent performance and just work basically. And so there was that. So that was that basically. I just thought, I'll have a crack at it.
Very good. So we've talked about hardware and we've talked about games. I want to ask you, what is your favorite Amiga application if you had to pick one?
For a long time, it was definitely SignaSed. It was SignaSed. That was the one. I missed SignaSed like mad. There just wasn't enough text editors on Windows. The only thing you could get out of the Linux fanboys was, you should be using Vi.
Yeah.
Vi is awesome, and I used Vi for the first time on a shell prompt and a shell account. I was like, are you kidding me? this is just totally unusable because everything was weird cryptic shortcuts and commands, and they were going, oh no, Vi's really powerful. I'm like, yeah, but you can't bloody well use it. It's too hard to use. And on Windows, this just wasn't anything good. I can't remember what the text editor I used to use on Windows before Notepad++ came along. When I finally got a hold of Notepad++, I stopped missing Sigma. I can't remember what the editor I used to use was called. But I think one of the things I know it had, which you really do need if you're a programmer, is the ability to column mark text. You know, where you can cut out a vertical block of text. That was essential, and nothing had it. And I remember I found this editor, and it had it. It had it. Finally, the one thing I missed from Sigma said, I don't miss anymore as a programmer. But yeah, I think probably Sigma said. And at first, I used to use Diskmaster 2 on the Amiga, for file management. I used to use it was called Diskmaster 2. Which I got from Amiga format again, and I had my Diskmaster 2 customized with all sorts of, because you could basically script Diskmaster 2, and you could basically completely customize Diskmaster 2 just with scripts, and even the layout of the user interface. And I had it set up with the two columns left and right, and the middle and one at the bottom, and I had everything customized. I could do, archives, make archives. I could do everything with it. That was insanely powerful. And at first, when I got to Windows and we just had the File Explorer, I was like, this really isn't it? It's a bit crap. But I sort of got used to it. I think as well, it's like, stuff like archivers are easier to use on Windows anyway. And they integrate into Explorer well enough that, now if I want to make an archive, I just select a folder, right click, archive. The same with expanding archives, right click, extract archive to here, done. So I don't miss that as much. But the one I missed the most was Sigma said.
So, covered your games and applications. Were there any demos that you liked, or did you have a favourite demo? Were you into demos at all?
Yeah, I remember seeing Baseball's State of the Art and Nine Fingers. This was particularly impressive. It was just the amount of they got in. I mean, the whole idea that who'd done State of the Art, he'd captured video motion, well, not motion captured. I think he rotoscoped it, didn't he? He rotoscoped the video, because the video of the girls who danced for both of those demos is on YouTube now. The videos of the girls dancing that he copied has leaked onto YouTube, and to see this one, I mean, even the first one, to have digitized all that stuff into the Amiga, rotoscoped it into vectors to render, was impressive. I think he actually wrote some software to do it, I believe he did. And then Nine Fingers just took that to a whole new level, because that just had the shading and the face and stuff. And it was amazing what you could do back in the day. And given that, if you had a video camera, you were rich. For a start, just VHS, you were rich. And then never mind all the equipment. So they were favourites of mine. Actually, the one thing that reminded me of is, have you seen Bad Apple?
No.
Yeah. It's been ported to so many platforms now.
Bad Apple is basically it's vector done. It's done just completely with shading. And as soon as I saw Bad Apple, I thought, oh yeah, that's like state of the art. That's the same process, and it's been as Lucas says, it's been ported to so many. Funnily enough, there isn't a good Amiga version of it. The only Amiga version I've seen of it is somebody who did it with Gala, and I thought to myself, why has nobody done it with code? Nobody's done it with code. With obviously the music would have to be a mod or something, but the video side of thing, you could do that on the Amiga just with the blitter and line filling. Why hasn't somebody done it yet? So, and then I thought, maybe I'll have a go, but because I have to see what I can remember about driving the Amiga hardware for a start at assembly level, whether I can remember enough of it. But that's what I thought. No, somebody needs to do Bad Apple on the Amiga. I've done it on all these old systems. Like there's one on the BBC Micro. Somebody's done Bad Apple on the BBC Micro in teletext mode. It's really good. It's really good when you consider that it is being done as teletext pages.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah.
On the 6502 on the Beam. Yeah, it's like, so I was like, somebody needs to do that on the Amiga. Go to demo. I don't remember all of them, but I remember seeing them. I used to go to computer fairs in Liverpool. That's where I used to get all my PD discs from. And you would walk around the computer fairs, and there were PCs running. PCs running, and they were always running Doom, or for some reason you'd have all the demo people selling PCs set out, and they were either running Doom or Descent or Jazz Jackrabbit, and the crappy machines would be running Wolfenstein. But you'd walk around the shows and you'd see the people doing Amiga stuff, and you'd see Amiga demos running, and they always have big speakers. You also used to have big speakers and blare and the sound out. And the other thing you used to hear was boing for X-Copy.
Right, and Peter, you've recently started, as you mentioned, a recap service. Is there any chance, or how can anyone actually contact you?
The best way at the moment is probably through Facebook. I'll stress at the moment, to begin with, I'm only going to do local for now, to see how we go.
No, absolutely, I think it's a wise move.
Mainly, it's the whole courier thing, basically. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be sort of doing locally to Norwich, but we'll see how we get on, and if things go well, I'll consider making it more sort of widespread and get set up that way. So, but yes, not to do the likes of Steve Clifford and so on out of work, because they do brilliant work, but I think it's just, there's a lot of people who want that sort of service, and not enough people offering it, because I know Steve Clifford is extremely busy with the stuff that he does, and then everybody who does it, but I know that there's quite a bit of demand and there are not enough people. So it's just mostly this sort of neck of the woods up here where I live. People don't want to send their Amigas through couriers. They don't really want to do what makes things a lot cheaper is if they take the main boards out of their Amiga and send them in a bag, anti-static bag. But people don't want to do that because they don't really know what they're doing and whether they'll damage. So there is sort of this aspect to it. Is it's sort of a local need first. See how that goes, and that goes well. I'll certainly consider two sort of wider things. I'm sort of going to start with recapping and some repair, and then maybe if I sort of make enough money that I can buy, I could do with a more modern, decent oscilloscope, for example. I can start sort of taking on sort of more advanced repairs. I talk on the Facebook group quite a lot about repairs and people with hardware faults, and I talk with John Hertel. You know, he's been doing brilliant work on sort of relaying out the boards. That's just
absolutely,
you know, it's painstaking work. I mean, designing a PCB is quite involved, but when you're doing the work at that level where you're mistakenly copying just from an image, because whenever I do a PCB, I've got a schematic diagram entered into I use Eagle. I've got a schematic diagram entered of the design I'm working on, and then Eagle is, when you go to PCB level, Eagle shows you how all the parts need to be connected up. You know, it will show you what this pin needs to be connected to that pin and so on. And if when you start routing the tracks down on the board, Eagle will tell you if you go wrong and you connect something to where it shouldn't be connected. It will tell you. But what John's doing is solely visual. So he's just basically got a picture and he's laying out the PCB tracks according to that image. And it's so painstaking. I wouldn't have the patience to do it.
It's a serious job, all right.
Yes, but it's sorely needed because the amount of especially the bigger box Amigas, like the A2000 and A3000, have been destroyed by battery damage or whatever, or even leak capacitor damage, and that's always the sort of big big problem. Is when you've got damage to the PCB, there's only so much repair work you can do.
Yeah.
It's stuffed. It's not feasible to do a repair, and in new PCBs, it's finally sort of feasible to make those machines. It's really good stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, we've got one closing question for you, Peter. If you had to pick one memory, what would be your fondest memory of your time with Amiga?
I think it's definitely going to be going to World of Amiga 99, seeing everybody else who were into the Amiga and meeting people and age where the Amiga was sort of unfortunately going down the plug hole. It was just amazing to see the community and still vibrant and still really into it. Basically, there's nothing like that sense. You don't get that. You don't get that with anything on the PC. I mean, you don't even get that. You don't even really get that with Linux. Even the Linux community is something I find quite toxic as well. They tend to be very toxic. But this sort of community spirit that the Amiga had, nothing else like it since. And before it started going sour, it was good. The Amiga 99 was great.
Lovely.
So we did have hopes that the Amiga would come back. We did have hopes, but it just, on that conference we were standing there thinking, nah, this is a load of businessmen talking tap basically, and it'll come to nothing. And unfortunately it did come to nothing. It's just such a shame. Yeah. We were talking to a PD guy who ran a PD company in Liverpool, and they had to go away from Amiga and over to PC stuff. The Amiga is probably the world's best kept secret. That if Amiga had management, Apple had, we would have PC and we would have Amiga instead of PC and Apple.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's the best kept secret by its own parent company.
Yeah, I think Commodore were just dreadful, weren't they? Some of the boneheaded mistakes they made were just ridiculous.
Absolutely.
I mean, I even got stiffed by one because my first Amiga was an A600, and I think we bought it for Christmas that year, and then like 4 months later the A1200 came out, and they dropped the price of the A600 and made the A1200 the price.
Yeah.
And even my dad was like, you bastards, could have got a better machine.
Yeah.
They just completely fumbled that one. They either should have got it. They should have got it out for Christmas.
Yeah, the 600 was my first Amiga as well. Although thankfully I was blissfully unaware of the 1200 at the time.
Yeah, I've still got mine. I've still got my A600 here. It needs a new keyboard membrane, unfortunately. But yeah, otherwise it's in good condition. I do remember it was repaired by Commodore at some, well, not Commodore, but whoever it was they sent out. They repaired it at one point, because I remember not long after I got it, the keyboard went really screwy. It would type random letters and then the disk drive stopped working. So they came out and they replaced the main board, and yeah. And the sad thing is, there's all this time later I can now look at that and go, I failed in my old Amiga now.
Yeah.
CIA chip failed. That CIA chip must have failed. So yeah.
I love hearing of people who still have their original Amiga. There's a couple of people in the group who come to the event every year who are still in that boat, and it's great. And I'm delighted you've kept your original Amiga and given it a bit of an upgrade and didn't flog it or get rid of it. I've got a friend's A500 Plus actually. I went to school with him and threw it out. His parents threw it into a skip. And I saw it. I just walked past his house and saw the A500 sticking out of the skip, and I thought, it's mine. I'm having that. Took it out of the skip, and I've only got I've had the A500 Plus, and I had the power supply. The power supply was dead, so I think that might have been why it got thrown out. But the A500 Plus itself, and funnily enough, I mentioned it to him. I'm in touch with him on Facebook, and I mentioned it to him, and he went, "Oh," he said, "I was gutted when my parents did that." He said, "They threw my finger out." He said they were pissed you had it out the skip because they saw you take it. He said, "I'm made up." He said, "I'm made up. You've still got it." And he said, "Has it got this sticker on it?" What sticker? And he described it. Oh yeah, that's on the side of it.
Oh yeah, I stuck that on, and he's made up. I'm made up. He said it still exists. So I didn't tell him how much they're worth now, though. But he might want it back. But yeah,
I was reading a thread online about somebody who works in one of those dumps, and he found a load of Amigas in there, but because of the laws in the area, this in the States, he actually wasn't legally allowed to retrieve them. You're not allowed to take electrical waste back out. So
that does my head in so much.
Yeah.
Well, it does that my head in so much about any electronics, because I hate the sort of throwaway culture we've got. I mean, every time I've been down to the dump, I see TVs there, just LCD TVs, and I sit there and I look at them and go, there's probably not much wrong with that. Fix that really easily. But bad thing is it's cheaper to buy a new one than it is to pay an engineer to do the work.
That's right. Yeah.
So I always repair stuff with my own. And, So, but it's sad and so wasteful. Something like that or saw Amigas at my local hip, I'd be like, go to the guy and go, and I don't care what you say, I'm taking them. You can report me if you want, I'm taking them. So,
well, that's all we've got time for today. Peter, thanks so much for joining us and sharing us the fascinating history you have. And also, massive appreciation for supporting your community as well and doing repairs and stuff like that. It's fantastic that you're still with us.
Yeah. Just win UAE for long enough, but yeah, I like the real things. I like actually playing with an actual physical machine.
Absolutely.
And like I said, hopefully I'll be bringing that network card out for people and like that. So
excellent. Looking forward to it.
Look forward to it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, take care, everybody. We'll see you next month with our next episode of the Amiga Ireland podcast. And until then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.